Do you yearn for travel that involves outdoor adventure and learning? I do. I also have a passion for all things farming and agriculture. I've traveled to exotic jungles to learn about growing chocolate. I even once owned my own organic vegetable and sunflower farm. And now I'm planning my journey back to agriculture. Agritourism, defined as travel that involves some type of agricultural experience. Agritourism is all about entertaining, but the marketing strategist in me knows that at its core, agritourism is really about educating, and education affects change. My future farm needs to deliver a profound experience to all of its visitors. It needs to educate people about food, health, and climate. Join me to learn from experienced agritourism farmers and entrepreneurs and help me build my future farm strategy. And who knows, maybe one day soon you'll find yourself in a tropical jungle cutting open cacao pods with a machete, or savoring an outdoor plant-to-plate community dinner with 100 guests at a farm in Illinois. So let's tap into the agritourist in you. This is Jen Ross, your Agritourist podcast host. I have always had an interest in growing herbs and learning more about the medicinal qualities of different herbs and plants. This topic fascinates me. I know the power of mint and ginger in solving digestive issues, and I know that there are so many other natural remedies. So I was really looking forward to my interview with Linda Shanahan from Bluestem Botanicals. Linda did extensive education in herbalism on the West Coast. She is a registered nurse, a farmer, and her company has transitioned through the years from doing a CSA and farmers markets to medicinal herb kits, education programs, U-Pick, and now specializes in cocktail and mocktail kits for consumers. In addition, she has opened her own herbal store in her town. Enjoy my conversation with Linda Shanahan. You will learn so much. So Linda, how are you?
I'm good. I mean, it's kind of busy time of year, but it's always feels like it's a busy time of year. So I don't know if it ever gets better, like more relaxed until January.
So tell me, I was reading about everything on your website about the history, but why don't we start with you first? Tell me about you, give me your little bio and how you came to be in this world of herbs and botanicals and everything. So talk to me.
Okay. So I went to college in Philadelphia. So I grew up around Philadelphia in a suburb about 6 miles outside of the city. And as soon as I was old enough, I wanted to live in the city, even though I had my father's side of the family, which was more agriculturally based. My mother's side of the family was much more urban. So I grew up with this kind of mix of the two, but I migrated more toward the city. That was where my interest was. So I went to Temple, which is a pretty urban university, and graduated in 95, which, when I was in college at that time, the crack epidemic was really big. It was just a really difficult time in urban areas, particularly in urban areas that were hard hit by job losses in the 70s and 80s. And so I got a little bit depressed living there. And my thought was, I'm going to explore other parts of the country. So I ended up moving after graduation with my bachelor's degree with a focus on social work, moved to the West Coast, and I was in a program called AmeriCorps, which is kind of like a short-term domestic Peace Corps, I guess you could say. So went out to work at a logging town in Northern California called Wairika, which most people haven't heard of.
Never heard of.
No, it's way north, literally right at the border of Oregon. And I worked with communities hit by meth. So I went from a crack epidemic, time in one city to a very rural place where they were suffering from the same kinds of problems without race being involved as, one of the contributing factors, but just similar economic situations of desperation and sadness. And over the time of both being in the city and also then being in this more rural area, I always felt like plants had the answer, but I didn't really know enough about them. I one of the things that I kept thinking was how it seemed as though people were just nutritionally depleted, and that was contributing to their angst and inability to function in society. So ultimately, I ended up choosing to work in research, like behavioral research, and that was where I started to kind of formulate some of my ideas around nutrition. And meanwhile, I started learning more about the plants around me because I was feeling lonely. I missed, even though I, in some ways, hated the city, I missed the city a lot. And I needed to find some source of solace, and that was being in the woods. And as I, spent more time on the West Coast, I wanted to learn more about what was around me and identify some of these plants. And ultimately, that became an interest in how do I interact with these plants? How do I interact with these wild spaces on a deeper level? And I took a weaving class. My first class was in basket weaving, and I learned about harvesting iris and cattails and different plants I could use in making baskets. And I loved that tactile interaction. And then I thought, I really want to learn more about medicinal applications. And the internet was kind of a new thing to me. One of my roommates had a computer, so I did a search online for herbalists. This is like a new term. Remember, this is like in the 90s. Not that that was that long ago, but it was definitely still kind of newish to be interested in plant medicine. And there was this guy in Eugene, Oregon that was running classes. His name was Howie Brownstein, and I found him online, the Columbine School of Wizardry. And he invited me to come and interview for his program, which was starting that following fall or following spring. And so I interviewed with Howie and Stephen, and I fell in love with the idea of learning more. So I ended up moving to Eugene, Oregon, after a few years of living in Southern Oregon and working also in California, and kind of started on a path that changed my life. I just started learning more about plants, and we studied ecosystems and habitats and plant communities and what happens after wildfires and clear cuts and all these things, in addition to applications of plant medicine to human use. So it was just a very holistic approach to understanding ethical wildcrafting and interaction and sustainability. And so I kind of went from a completely different way I envisioned my life to something that was, I couldn't even imagined where my life would have led me at that point. So I just felt like I was doing the right thing all the time. Like, I'm on the right path as long as I was aligned with plants. And so I studied with more people. I found other teachers. I ended up becoming more and more interested in health and wellness, and decided that I needed to figure out some way to learn more that was going to help teach me more about humans. So I thought about medical school. I thought about nutrition programs. I thought about nursing, and I ended up going to nursing school because I seemed like the quickest, cheapest path to get there.
Yeah.
And so and the nutrition programs at that time were all stuck in 1952. It seemed like, so I just wasn't learning about counting calories. So I went to nursing school, and I ended up working in critical care for 14 years, hospice, home care, and critical care. So I kind of got my experience in that world, and then eventually went back and got a master's degree in public health nursing, continuing to follow that original path, which was kind of a more holistic understanding of human and environment interactions. And now I teach classes. So, and all in this time, I also started a farm. So it was that was kind of in there. That I was kind of like, instead of having a kid, I had a farm. So that's kind of the herbalism
Okay.
side.
Let me ask you, so going back to growing up,
Yeah.
From a food perspective and a nutrition perspective and even a gardening perspective, did you have that influence? What was that like? Like, where do you think the influence of plants came from? Or was
Yeah.
it just in you?
No, it's definitely some level of exposure. So when I was really young, my dad was always a gardener. He grew up farming, so he his family didn't have a farm. They had like 5 acres. They didn't have a big farm, I guess you could say.
That's still
he grew up with like a
decent.
cow and yeah. He grew up like milking his cow and always gardening and harvesting the beans and the tomatoes and whatever. So, and then as a teenager, he worked on truck farms around the area, and his best man at his wedding like was a big farmer in the area. So, I mean, he grew up around agriculture. So he always had a little bit of that in our backyard. And I remember when I was super young, as one of my earliest memories, harvesting cherry tomatoes and bringing them to my parents for breakfast in bed, like just a whole thing of cherry tomatoes. Happy breakfast, happy morning. So that
I
was
love
like,
that.
I loved interacting with the garden. And then when I was 5, we moved from this one house to a different house on the other side of town. And my way of introducing myself to the neighborhood kids, the azaleas were in bloom at the time. So I got a basket and I filled it up with azaleas, and I went around to the neighborhood kids and I introduced myself and gave them flowers. Like that was my way of connecting with people. And then as growing up, being exposed to my dad's kind of friend network and family network, I had an aunt and uncle that also had a big giant truck farm / roadside stand, diversified family vegetable farm. I would swim in the corn, I mean, we did things that maybe other suburban kids weren't able to do or had exposure to. And then I was interested in art. And so a lot of my drawings from high school and, younger were of plants. And I have one thing from college that I did a sketch, and it was an image of a rose growing up the side of a train track. And the title of it, I named Nature Prevails. So I had this kind of stream in my consciousness, but I didn't really know how to access it very well, maybe.
No, I think that that's wonderful. And so as you were pursuing this, how did your family react to that as you were out in Oregon and, like pursuing all this? What was their reaction, from, going to college, you know,
Yeah.
going out there working at AmeriCorps and then doing this program? Did they have any reaction to that?
I mean, they didn't really understand what I was doing, but I always did it while also maintaining full-time work. So, I mean, I was a pretty gritty kid. My parents weren't necessarily funding this at all. So they were just like, whatever you do is on you. But
Right.
they were kind of interested. My dad was interested. I mean, my dad was more of a, he's just more of a plant person, I guess you could say. And he was interested in what I was doing, but he also had no idea what I was doing. And I think they were maybe, I don't know that I ever told them how much I paid for these classes. I mean, I looked back in time recently and saw the cost of some of these courses, and it was a lot of money for that at that time. So, I was spending thousands of dollars on these courses, which were very intensive, but it was like paying for a semester in college. And I had no qualms about it. Like that's what I needed to do. Like there was no question,
Excellent. Well,
you
you were
know.
investing in something that you really wanted to learn.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you're working now in nursing in a very, US based, health infrastructure. How did that feel? Like what were the observations you made there? And it must have been contradicting at times.
Yeah, I felt like a fish swimming upstream. And that started in the nursing programs. So I, was taking prerequisites for nursing, and I had all these science people in my classes, which was not what I'm usually surrounded by. And I remember one of the students complaining about having to read books for her English class. And I was like, oh my God, wouldn't you rather read books than like memorize this stuff and regurgitate it? And she's like, no, I'd much rather just regurgitate. I'm like, okay, I think I don't belong here. So that was my first introduction. And then once I got into the hospital setting, we're gowning up and throwing away 5,000 million gloves every day and all the plastic, and then the quaternary solutions that we're cleaning with, and all like every step of the way. It wasn't just the system of care that we were providing to people. It was also the system within which we had to work that was so contradictory to what I had come to understand as a way of living on earth. It just was contradictory to
Right.
living on earth. So yeah, it was a struggle. But I also kept reminding myself that there's a human in this bed that needs care. And so that's kind of my daily mantra was there's a person here that needs my attention, and who to give it but me. Like I'm going to be the best person to give care to this person today. So I'm going to go do it. So that was kind of the attitude that I kept. And I tried to make inroads when I could. For example, I started a recycling program at my hospital, which came to find out was not none of the things that I was going literally week to week collecting recyclables floor to floor, and then collecting my own trash bags, and then every week bringing them down to the trash platform so that the recycling truck could come and get it. And one of the guys on the dock, one of the days after like a year of doing this, said, that this doesn't get recycled, right? I was like, what? And
Oh God.
yeah, so
Oh.
that was after I literally organized the whole house. Every hospital floor was like collecting recyclables. And I know that this is, we know now that this is what happens, but this was, 15 years ago. It was devastating for me to be told this. And I was so upset and angry that I ended up sending an email to the entire hospital. I got in a little trouble from the meeting.
What did you say?
I basically just said that we've been lied to, and just so you know, if you really want this to happen, you need to demand it from the administration. Like I was really, really mad. That was the beginning probably of my inability to really be invested in my workplace in the hospital system.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine that being so devastating. I remember when I found that out, I was like, all this time we're
Oh,
collecting and
yeah, I was so mad.
yeah. Ugh. Okay. So you were nursing. Where were you working at that time?
Yeah, so I was working in on a medical surgical floor initially, orthopedics and cardiac. So I was kind of split between these two areas. And then
And
I
where were you? West Coast or you were
East
back
Coast. I
east?
was East Coast
Okay.
at the time. I went to nursing. I started nursing school. I started prerequisite courses on the East Coast, West Coast rather, and definitely had some people in my community there, the herbal community. They were just like, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you going to nursing school? You're like selling out, whatever." I'm just like, "You guys are like too tight, too like stuck on things. You need to open up." Anyway, so
Yeah.
I loved my people there, but I also missed my people on the East Coast. So I moved to the East Coast, back to be closer to family. I'd met my husband while out there, drug him with me. And I went back to school here. And one of the things about moving back, not to get too off track, but we both felt very lost for a while. Like I didn't want to get out of bed for months. So we finally realized that in order to be able to live here, to stay here, we were going to have to create the world we wanted to live in. So that was kind of the beginning of the farm. Back to
Well,
the house.
why did you feel, what do you think, why did you think you felt that way?
I felt like I had gone back in time in a way.
Okay.
Um, because we had been living in a place where we had just this amazing community of people who were interested in living a life that was more focused on um, just more focused on balance with the environment around us, and good food and good community and interactions, and bicycle trails everywhere, because who needs a car? Like there was just a totally different way. Every grocery store that I went to, I could get everything in bulk. I did not ever have to use plastic bags. I never had to build up trash in my trash can, because it just wasn't necessary. Like the infrastructure was in place to live a better
Right.
life, right?
Right.
And it's really hard to do that without the infrastructure. So we moved back here. I'm still a bike commuter. At this time, I had no car. So I moved back here, and I get on my bike to ride around my county, and I feel as though cars are trying to hit me on purpose, literally. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, I can't live here. Like I can't live here. So that was kind of the beginning of the, oh my God, what did we do? And then, Eric and I talked about it. How are we gonna do this? Okay, we need to create something that will bring people to us that we know we can relate to and that are interested in the same things. And then we started a small CSA.
Okay. And why that? Why a CSA? I mean,
That
I
was
actually had one, so I know, I know a lot about it, but I'm just curious why that.
yeah, that was my question actually also. No. Used to have like a glorified homestead. My husband was like, we're never gonna really get good at this unless we make it a business. And we both grew up with parents in business, and that's probably part of it. And we also both committed to ourselves that we were never going to go into business because of that, but we did it anyway. Um, so yeah, we started with finding land first. So we had our little house that we bought when we moved here in town. Very walk centric little town that we live
And
in.
what town was that?
Doylestown, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So it's on a train line to the city. If we wanted to go to Philly, there's a bus that takes you to New York. So it's a very commutery
Nice.
town, but it's also independent in some ways of other towns around it because it's has everything you need, which is one of the reasons we chose to live here. And there's a hospital in town run by women, so that was the other reason I kind of wanted to live here. Yeah,
Oh,
although
nice. Okay.
but it's okay. Um, so yeah, we first looked for land that we could lease, and we went through a couple trials of places that didn't work out for various reasons, and then ultimately through the grapevine, we'd heard about this family that had basically a 50-acre estate, and part of it was in conservation, and they wanted to find an organic farmer because it was being farmed for sod. And they had moved there with their 3 young children and were concerned that the chemicals being used for sod production were affecting their well, which was a legitimate concern. So
Yep.
met them, loved them, they loved us. We've been there ever since. That was 17 years ago.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, yeah.
I didn't
So
realize it was the same property. That's terrific.
yeah, so it's been 17 years, and we started out with a 12-member CSA. And the CSA was vegetables, herbs, and flowers. So
Okay.
I was always wanting to grow the herbs to make my tinctures and do my thing. And my husband wanted to do the vegetables. And the flowers were me trying to make up for the deficit that I knew my husband was going to have in vegetable production. So yeah, I wasn't somewhat confident, but I was not 100% confident. So I always had to be
Did he have experience with this?
no,
No. I
no,
love it.
no.
But I love that. I
Yeah,
love also that he wanted to do that.
it's so him. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
terrific. What's his background?
He's a controls engineer. He grew up in HVAC contracting business, like
Okay.
heating, ventilation, plumbing. So he grew up crawling under houses and connecting, pipes and setting up ductwork and primarily industrial facilities. And when he was in college, he studied controls engineering, which is kind of like a higher level role within that world of facilities. But one of the main kinds of facilities his family's company worked on were uh, food processing plants. And so growing up in Michigan, he did like poultry processing and chicken processing plants. And he was so disgusted by those conditions that he ended up becoming vegetarian for a long time. So when I
Yep.
met him in Eugene, he had resolved himself to only eat vegetable based foods, no fish, no meat. He was certainly never going to give up dairy, though, being from the Midwest. So he was a mac and cheese vegetarian.
So tell me what that first year of doing a CSA was like.
Yeah, it was so stressful, even though it was only 12.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. We had no idea on timing. We had no, I mean, we had gardened. I mean, we knew gardening, but it's just different when you're trying to grow at scale, even a small scale like that. I had nightmares about, I was mostly doing the seed propagation. So I had nightmares about flats like dying for no reason or not germinating or nothing ever seemed like it was gonna work out. And then amazingly, a lot of it did. So, but we definitely learned a lot that first year. We were producing at the farm, and then everyone picked up in our backyard. So the only members our first year were basically our neighbors. So all of our neighbors were so supportive. We got chickens to supplement the share. So everybody got a dozen eggs along with, because we knew we would get the eggs. As long as we were eating these chickens and we didn't get eaten by foxes, we would have eggs. Although a lot did get eaten by foxes and picked up by hawks. Um, because they were free range. So we figured it out and we got better each year. So the first year was 12 members, second year was 25, third year was 50, and then we started doing wholesale accounts, farmers markets, and then ultimately after a few years we had 5 full-time employees and a few part-time employees, and it just got to be like, oh my God, what did we do? This is not what we planned in terms of business management. It was just eating away at our lives because, as you may know, I mean, small farming is not exactly lucrative. And we were
Yep.
also working full or part-time. One of us was always trying to handle a full-time role on top of it. And it got to be just oppressive. Initially, it was like uplifting and community building, and we made so many amazing lifelong friends. And then it started to feel oppressive.
Okay. So then what happened after that?
So we started our first full season was 2008 and it was 2016. So after 8 years,
Wow.
we realized we needed to like recalibrate. It had almost gotten just too big for us, too much going on. I mean, one thing that we were realizing was that it wasn't ecologically sustainable on the site that we were on to be producing this much food. So an example was lettuce, and that was the biggest thing that just felt soul killing to me was we were tilling every week or two. We were tilling a whole nother bed, maybe not a quarter acre, but probably a 16th to an eighth of an acre every other week for more lettuce. Like everybody eats lettuce. Everybody
Yeah.
wants, and we were just like, oh my God, this is so ridiculous. We're just killing the soil. We're not growing anything of nutritional substance, in my opinion. Not that lettuce is bad, but it's just like this for such a small space because we were only farming on a few acres. It just yes, it was making money, but was it really worth it? And um was it sustainable for our backs and our bodies as we age? And we were just like, this is just not it. Like, this is not it. So one day, one of my teachers, I studied with David Winston when I moved back here, who's another teacher on the East Coast. And he has a business that makes tinctures. And his company reached out and asked if we'd be willing to produce for them, maybe a crop for them. And we grew tons of basil. And they said, well, we're looking for holy basil, like Tulsi. And I'm like, oh, well, I can grow that. I already grow Tulsi. Sure, we can do more of that. So we grew 100 pounds for them. And then another 100 pounds for them, I think, that first year. And the first time we harvested it, my husband and we harvested the 100 pounds. They wanted it washed, cleaned, air dried, did all that, and then delivered it the next morning in a few boxes and got paid $1,000 or whatever it was.
And you're
And we were
like,
like, this is way better than doing a farmer's market. Like, what? So we said, all right, that's it. We're all in for doing commercial production of herbs for these small manufacturers. Problem was there's not many of them. And we kind of got a couple more contracts for other companies and for Herbalist and Alchemist and for some others. And then we realized, oh wait, it's not necessarily the most reliable because we had contracts canceled because then they had contracts canceled for them. So, like a company ordered for us that next year a whole many hundreds more pounds of something, and then we grew all that. And then a month before harvest, we get the message, oh, the tincture that we were going to make with that harvest, the buyer canceled their order, so we can't buy that 600 pounds that you had said you would produce for us. Meanwhile, we have 600 pounds sitting in the field that then just goes to flower and gets tilled under. So it's a tricky business to navigate. So what we realized after that season of learning, we were still doing some vegetable production at the time and doing farmers markets. We need to be the seller. We need to be the end provider. We need to be the value adder. So we decided to invest in the farm. Even though we leased the land, we built a commercial kitchen. We put in a drying facility. That was actually the first thing we did was a drying facility. So we started drying the herbs so that we had a place to go with our herbs to farmers market.
let me ask you a question. So, because what you just said also about leasing the land is important because I was leasing land and I ended up having to end the lease because the church owned the property and the nonprofit that worked with the church never wanted to do a CSA, and my CSA was like my bread and butter.
Yeah.
And I did farmers markets and all that, but we all know the manual labor involved in that, and the CSA was the bread and butter. at that time, and it was building like yours built. It was like started out with 25, doubled to 50, double, 100 the next. It was like really growing. And then all of a sudden the farm saw this and the nonprofit, and they're like, we're going to do a CSA. And I'm like, well, I was like, I'm not going to compete with them. I loved them. They donated a lot of their produce to food pantries. I was all about, we basically, the money from the lease was basically going into their nonprofit and their mission, which I believed in. I volunteered there for many years. So I ended up saying, okay, you do this here, but that was hard. It was hard, because you built this infrastructure, you marketed, you got these customers, and you literally are just handing them over. But so leasing always, like, I am scared of leasing. I'm afraid to look into that again and create this infrastructure and create a community around you and all that. And then, so how did you reconcile that? I mean, you had this long-term relationship with these people. So how did you, because you're now committing infrastructure that's a little bit more than irrigation, like what was that? Just give me a perspective of kind of how you resolved that in your head and what that was like, because I think that's important when people are thinking on taking on these ventures, in what they need to really think about and consider.
Yeah. So on one hand, we had been investing from the time we started leasing because there was no well, there was no fencing, there was no driveway, nothing. So we were investing from the very beginning. And it was painful at first. And it's still sometimes I think about it as being somewhat painful. But part of the way I reconcile it is it's one, the cost of doing business. Two, we're not paying a mortgage. So we may otherwise be paying a pretty costly monthly mortgage. So we make these, smaller, large less frequent investments that may be larger, that then carry us into the future for some time and ultimately are less than we would be paying if we were buying the land. And when we sign our lease, every 5 years we renew our lease. They the owners of the land that we're on are really amazing, and supportive. And so they agree to invest back to us if the lease were to end, like an aggregated amount, based on our investment. So they really do. We know we're super lucky, and we've known of farmers who have not been so lucky with their situations they've been in, like losing everything they had because of losing access. So I sympathize with people who don't have good relationships with the people that own the land they're on, but we have had, and really that's how we justify the spending, is we know that we have a good relationship with them.
No, that's important. And you want to know that you're working with people who really believe in what you're doing and that have those beliefs about, soil and the earth and the environment, and share that so that it's just not a lease, a financial agreement.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. Okay. So you invested a commercial kitchen. Tell me about that some more.
Yeah. So when we first built the drying facility, and the walk-in cooler. So we had done this a few years before actually building the kitchen out. We basically had a wash pack shed. We had 2 shipping containers that we purchased that provided our cooler and our drying room. And then we placed them 20 feet apart, and we had access to a friend's roof trusses. I don't even know how my husband got these, but we had like roof trusses for a 20 by 40 building, basically. And we basically spaced the shipping containers on either side of this negative space. That was our wash pack shed. We put the roof on. And then a few years later, after building up more value-added product lines, like we were making simple syrups and we were distilling hydrosols, and we were doing the simple syrups in rented kitchens for a couple of years. We realized we really needed to have our own kitchen. So we poured concrete to put piping in. And because my husband's family does this for a living, they just came out and helped us dig it all out and put the pipes in. I mean, it was really amazing to have them. And then we poured concrete, and then we had a kitchen. minimal expense because we did it on the cheap. And the Department of Agriculture came out and they looked at it and they were like, this looks great. They actually were very impressed and said that this is one of the nicer kitchens they see at farms. So I'm like, awesome.
I was going to say that's a big compliment.
Yeah. And then we started working in our kitchen in 2018. I think 2018 was when we got it certified the first year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what happened from there?
So we started distributing simple syrups and hydrosols and dried herbs. That was kind of our main product line. And until COVID, we were building up a relationship with bars and restaurants, selling a lot of wholesale. The hydrosols, the bartenders were using as aromatizers on top of drinks, which initially I thought was going to be skincare industry, but they weren't necessarily biting. So the bars were, so that's who we focused on. And
That's great.
We were kind of marketing toward bars that were higher end that maybe didn't have time to make their own simple syrups, but a lot of bartenders like, I make my own simple syrups. Okay. Ours are better, but okay. So ultimately we did find enough bars that were willing to buy what we were making at scale. And by the time COVID had come around, we had become very dependent on the restaurants for our revenue. So we had kind of moved away from markets, and we were doing some markets, but primarily we were building up wholesale. That was where the momentum was headed. And then COVID happened. And with COVID, all of our wholesale business was done in 24 hours, like everybody closed. Right? So we were like, what the hell are we going to do? And I had been doing some classes. I had been teaching herbalism and making tinctures and doing all my thing kind of on the side. At one point I had a practice where I was seeing clients, and I had my own little side thing called Bluestem or Barefoot Botanicals. We were Barefoot
Yes.
Gardens. And then we were still Barefoot Gardens. And then I had started this side company, Barefoot Botanicals, where I was focused on herbal education and some herbal products and stuff like that. And then we eventually changed the farm name to Barefoot Botanicals to reflect that change to primarily herbs. So COVID happened, kind of fast forward again to COVID. And I decided I'm going to switch all my courses to online. I'm going to start a medicine maker CSA because I've done that before. People are going to need this. I started it. So that March I started. So March 16th or whatever, the world shut down. By the end of March, had a whole medicine maker CSA that I had almost sold out of the amount of shares.
Tell me about what that is.
So the Medicine Maker CSA is, I basically took the course I was already teaching, which was hands-on medicine making, plant ID, and body system understanding and herbal use, which was a comprehensive 7-month program. I broke it into 2 parts. One half was like videos of me talking about body systems and herb use, and then the other half was the Medicine Maker. So the medicine maker side of it was basically a medicine maker CSA. So I set it up to be using all the content that I had already created over years of teaching classes. And each month they got a box of herbs and I taught them how to make stuff with them via video, recorded video.
I absolutely love that.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Amazing. It was a lot of work, but it was great. So I shipped people boxes of herbs, or they came and picked up, and it was freshly harvested herbs. And my first year, when I say sold out, that first year, I think I had 35 members, something like that. And then the second year I had 75. So it kind of expanded from year to year also. And then, let's see. And then the other side of it was the more theoretical content, which I really struggled with doing online without more help. I'm teaching botany and how to identify this leaf and trying to hold it up to the screen. And I'm like, okay, this is not the best platform for this content for me. I mean, I think someone else who had more video editing skills and all that would have been better. So I carried the Medicine Maker CSA on for a couple of years, and then ultimately decided I just wanted to sell herbs. in to people for whatever they wanted. So now I do a little bit of it kind of transitioned to being, I notify people when I have herbs ready for buying, and then people can buy herbs, and people buy up front. They can give me money, and then I give them a discount on the herbs as the season goes on. So that's like a buyer's club that I now offer. But
Okay.
that's it's evolved basically. It was a lot of work to do the CSA model. I loved it. If I could have just done that for a living, I would have, but it involved the rest of my team that had other stuff that they needed to be doing to maintain the other side of the
Right.
business, which is what I also wanted to mention from COVID. Sorry, this is a long-winded answer.
No,
Was
no, no. It's
half
good.
of the business was my side of it, which focused on medicine making and herbalism, which was needed at the time, definitely. Always needed,
Yep.
but really needed at that time. The other side of the business, because we lost all our retail accounts, our restaurant accounts rather, we decided to pivot hard, reach out to some of our favorite bartenders that we were working with for the last few years and hire them to make videos, make recipes up and make videos of them making drinks and then sell these cocktail kits. So the cocktail kits and mocktail kits are, that first year was a little bit more experimental, but we had enough bite from people to be like, okay, this is something. We started subscriptions for them. And then ultimately it became our business. So most of our business now is cocktail and mocktail kits with herbs that we grow at the farm and then make into these combinations for making drinks.
So obviously it was a hard pivot, but whose idea was that?
It was my husband, all my husband. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And what was he thinking? Like, I mean, you had all the quote unquote ingredients to make this happen, all the skills, everything was there, but where did he come up with that? Because it's brilliant.
Yeah. So he doesn't drink. So he's always searching for fun ways to use herbs and drinks without alcohol. But because we were selling a lot to bartenders, so much of what we were hearing from the bartenders was, "Oh my God, this lemongrass pairs so well with whatever. Like this simple syrup that you gave us. Oh my God, with gin drinks, it's just amazing." Like we'd get this feedback from people, and even though he isn't tasting them, he's taking this information in and he's just like, our stuff is amazing with drinks. We need to get this into people's hands, you know? So because he has it in his head that people need help figuring this out because he needed help figuring it out, that this was a way to support the bartenders that supported us from the very beginning of playing around with these ingredients that they'd never heard of, and then also a way for us to stay in business, you know? So for him, it was a combination of personal interest and also self-preservation. And it really has been a successful pivot for us. It has carried us through the last few years and carried us through COVID. I mean, for sure. Like a lot of businesses went under and we were thriving.
Wow.
Yeah.
So today, so from a summary perspective, give me a perspective of today at the farm.
Mhm.
So what are you offering? And to what type of customer, who are the target markets of each? I just want to kind of get a summary of where we're at today in 2024, what's
Yeah.
going on. Because I love the evolution. It's just when you look back, it's interesting how you look at the evolution of just your own education, and your husband's background and how it all kind of marries up to what's going on. So give me a lay of the land today,
Yeah.
literally.
So now we grow 75 plus medicinal crops that range in size of production from 50 row feet, because we maybe just need it to make a tincture this year,
How
to
many acres are you on now? How many acres right now?
about 5.5 or
Okay.
so.
Okay.
We lease a total of 18, two of which is wooded, five of which we planted to native plants. Woodies, that was another project I didn't tell you about, but I did a 3-acre native planting and corridor establishment with wetlands and berms and all that, to create habitat. And then we added 2 more acres to that in ponding areas and more wetlands to help keep water on site, and prevent runoff. And then the owners of the land are kind of taking back some of the space for their own growth. So a couple acres we've kind of ceded back to them in a way. So about 5 to 6 acres any given season, both in cover crops and crop production.
Okay. All right. So tell me about, the economics, like what's going on as far as what you're doing, from a
Yeah.
business perspective.
Yeah. So most of our production over the course of the season is geared toward holiday sales. So we are making simple syrups and distilling hydrosols and putting together products for kit making to sell in Q4. So we're selling October, November, December. Throughout the year, we're selling a small amount of tinctures and teas and simple syrups that are hydrosols, also the main product lines we offer that are carrying us through the season with a low level of support. I would say it's probably quarter of our total revenue is everything else. And then we basically make the most of our money in the fall from our kits. So we really have had to figure out financial acrobats to make this work, because we definitely we have to basically take loans out in the season in order to get us through until our fall sales. But I've tried to do more fresh sales this year to try to carry us through. So, for example, yesterday they were harvesting a few 100 pounds of rose geranium because we don't need it all for syrup production and hydrosols. We have extra that we planted, so we're putting it in the dryer and we're selling a bunch fresh to try to bridge that gap in what we have in the field. So it kind of varies week to week, but most weeks we're making a batch or two of simple syrup. We're distilling a batch of hydrosol, which is about 6 gallons per batch, 50 pounds of plant material for each batch, which is small. It's not a lot, so we don't have to have acres and acres and acres of plants to make our products. Each batch of tincture we're making between 3 and 5 gallons typically of each batch of tincture. That's shelf stable. And we make glycerids and infused oils. So each week we're probably making 2 or 3 medicinal products like tinctures or infused oils, and then a batch of simple and a batch of hydrosol. And then the field production is just keeping things going so that it's harvestable stage. But a lot of our crops we're only harvesting a couple times. Some of them we harvest only once. Our roots they're just sitting in the field until we harvest them in October. So again, with so many different crops, it keeps it very diverse. Each week is different than the week before.
So you're no longer you're full time with this, or do you?
Yeah, so I am full time. So it varies on season. So in the spring, I manage the seed production. So I'm like in the greenhouse pretty much all the time in the spring. And then I have a plant sale in June, early June, and then I'm like not at the farm as much because my classes have started. So I'm doing a lot. I'm at the farm, but I'm teaching. My focus is on the teaching and some of the production. I'm helping guide, I'll do field walks and like say, hey, this is ready. This isn't ready. Oh, when you harvest this is how you harvest it. Because every year I have new people that need guidance on how to grow herbs because it's different than vegetables. But mostly I am doing more of the business end at this point. I'm on the website, adding, taking away, updating. We now have a shop that just opened. So I'm at my shop. I now have my little herb store in town, which is great. So I'm there.
Great.
Yeah. So I'm there a bit more. That just opened a couple weeks ago. So I have to figure out the schedule there. But yeah, I'm not at the farm as much. I mean, I'm there almost every day, but I'm not there. I'm definitely not working out in the field. And after years of nursing, honestly, and farming, my back just can't take it anymore. And once you hit, it's like the engine light starts going off. So engine light starts to go off. Yeah.
So the classes that you're offering, so I guess, who are they for? Who's your target market there? What's the opportunity for someone to learn?
Yeah.
Because this is, what you're doing and your knowledge is pretty amazing. I want to come learn from you.
Yeah. So I usually open up signups in the fall for the following spring, and I'm usually out by February, early March. So I this year I had 48 slots open for classes. I do groups of 12. So I'm limited because it's a hands-on course. to 12 people per group. Like I can't
Right.
teach botany to more people than that because in each class we're learning a little bit of botany. So and it's all medicine making and I only have so big of a kitchen. So it is challenging in that way because it stretches me pretty thin. So I limit myself to 4 groups of 12 per month. And
Okay.
month that same course is repeated for each of those groups and it's April through October. We start with spring greens, a lot of wild and weedy species, and we learn about those. And then we culminate with bark harvesting in the fall. And do a different body system each month. And it runs kind of in tune with the seasons as well. So we started with digestion and liver and nervous system, and then we kind of make our way toward respiratory and immune. And, so I try to keep it in line with what people are thinking about at the time. At the climax of the summer during July, we focus on skin and we make creams and lotions and we distill hydrosol. So it's a really fun course in which you get to see the progression of the farm season. We do a field walk every single month. You learn a
Okay.
little bit about growing, but primarily it's focused on making, harvesting and making, and then how to apply what you harvest and make. So you end up with going home with a product each month. So everybody goes home with their little something that they get each month. And by the end of the class, people feel like they see the world differently. I mean, my goal is for people to go from looking around them and seeing just a sea of green to seeing a whole bunch of friends. And that's what I really do think I'm successful at helping impart. People feel as though their lives are changed after taking the class. I'm not like toot my own horn there, but that's just what people say. So yeah, it's good.
That's terrific. That is really terrific. So, do you do outside of that class, are there any types of farm tours or anything else that you do, or is it mostly through those classes?
I do you pick events every first Sunday of the month. So
Okay,
I
so what's
open.
that?
So that is when I basically from 10 to 2, weather depending on the first Sunday of each month, I open up the farm for anybody to come and pick their own herbs. I do
Nice.
guide them because they need to learn how to do it. So I have a volunteer who then runs them out to the field and shows them how to harvest each crop. They have to give me a driver's license or something of value to get clippers from me because I need to get those clippers back.
I like that.
But people love it. And I tell people if they want to come to the farm for a farm tour, quote unquote, I'm like, just come and tour yourself on a U-Pick day because I don't have time to run farm tours, you know? So I come for a U-Pick day and you can wander around. You don't have to pick anything. So that's a great way to come to the farm. And then another is in September, we do an open house, either September or October. I actually need to confirm the date this year, but it's an open house where we do a distillation demo. Typically, we do a farm tour. We have the farm open for the public to come and some years we have music, so we are surrounded by development on all sides. So we have to be careful with the music, but it's a really nice event for people to share with us. Yeah. And see
That's
the farm.
great.
Mhm.
Okay, excellent. And you're not sure of the date this year?
No, we haven't decided.
Okay.
It's usually we have to coordinate around cannabis harvest. We grow high CBD cannabis, a small amount. It's gotten smaller each year. And that cannabis harvest drives to some extent weekends for us because we do U-Pick of cannabis as well.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, yeah. So the U-Pick event for cannabis has to be timed within 3 weeks of the testing agent coming and testing the plants, because otherwise the THC and CBD levels get too high to sell. So, or the THC levels rather, get too high for us to sell it. So we have to have the state come out, do a test. We get the test results back, and once we get approved that we can sell, we do a U-Pick event, and it's that U-Pick event that we then also try to schedule the open house. So it's the last couple of years has been a little tricky trying to schedule our open house. Yeah.
Okay. Well, sounds like it could be popular.
You think of it as very popular.
I would imagine. Um, so two final questions. One, any new plans for the next few years? Like, you definitely have evolved with the times, and you've been applying different learnings throughout. Like, it seems like, a compilation of all your learnings throughout have been applied here. Like, is there anything you really want to do or you don't want to do anymore, or something you want to evolve to in the next few years?
Yeah. So one of the things that we really wanted to not do going forward is so many events off farm. We were just getting tired. So we kind of put it out there to the universe that we wanted to have a farm home, like a farm store, which we can't do at our current location because we lease our land and they have another business up front and we couldn't have our competition with them, which is why we only do events on Sundays because Sundays they're almost closed. So we came upon a location for a space to have a store in town. And so that is where I really think we can channel a lot of that energy that had been going out off farm to all these faraway places every weekend to do farmers markets and events. And so this next year in 2025, I really want to just pull my energy back in and just stay close to home. Um, I,
Okay.
one thing I loved about COVID, I mean, I know a lot of people felt alone. I loved it. I loved being alone. I mean, we were always farming, so we were never totally alone. But I loved that I didn't have to go all to these places. I could just be home and be at the farm and not worry about all these appointments for, events I had to pop up for or be at. And I really want that again. I just
Yeah.
want to be more stationary.
Yep. And then what advice would you have if someone had an interest in I guess there's a lot of aspects to what you do, but in this world and in potentially doing something similar to what you're doing, maybe not in the same business model, but getting into herbs and botanicals and all this, what would you suggest they think about? Um, you know, because it's not, there's a lot of intricacy to what you're doing as far as even just the land and leasing the land and all that. But what were some of the things that you would have them think about as far as, entering into this?
So for someone who's interested in learning more about herbalism, there's a couple different pathways you could do. You
Yep.
could be a grower, you could be a medicine maker, you could be so many things, a shopkeeper, whatever. There's all different ways. But I think everyone that's interested in learning about plant medicine um, really does best by learning through the plants themselves and being with the plants themselves. So there's a lot of online programs and some great programs to learn about herbs, and I think that's awesome. But if you are doing that, try finding the actual plants and seeing where they like to grow and how, what do they grow around? What kind of relationships do they have with the plants around them? It helps inform you of what gifts those plants have to offer to us. And it also, I think, helps you understand the plant better. For example, I have a hard time sometimes learning about plant ID without growing it. I just like, I understand the plant so much more when I've grown it in my garden. And so I understand its growth habits. I understand its cycles. I understand, oh, it doesn't really like the heat. I wonder if that herb has, a cooling effect on the body. It likes it cool, or oh, that plant really can't handle when it doesn't get watered, So all of those things that you learn about a plant helps inform you when you use the plant in yourself. So that's one thing I would say. Another is try to utilize the herbs that grow in your bioregion instead of keep reaching for all these super things that are from all around the world. I mean, everybody, loves acai berries from Brazil, but we have elderberries and we have aronia berries from here. Like you don't have to be getting these far away things to reach those same health goals. So that's another thing that I think is really important is sticking to your bioregion because that's what our bodies are living within and interacting with our ecosystem and our bioregion more deeply helps us be healthier and more resilient people. So getting
Excellent.
to know what's in your backyard and what's beyond your backyard in the more immediate area, I think is really the best part.
That's excellent advice. I do have one more question. So, what
Okay.
is your favorite plant? Do you have a favorite?
Oh, that's hard.
And
Um,
why?
Yeah. Okay. So I have a whole bunch of plants depending on the time of year that I love, but the one that stays with me all the time that I think I love more than any other plant is Prunella vulgaris or Selfie. It's this tiny little plant that grows all around us. You would recognize it if you've been someone who has worked in a garden. It's a small mint family plant that doesn't necessarily have an odor. It doesn't have a, flashy look to it. It's a small, short, 6 to 8 inches, maybe, purple flowered mint family plant that grows in pathways and on the edges of, part shade areas. And it is really, really high in, rosmarinic acid, which is a chemical that's highly antioxidant. It's actually it's named after rosemary because rosemary is such an antioxidant plant and it's high in that plant. It actually is common among many mint family plants like spearmint and lemon balm and all of this. And so that's one of the reasons why mint family plants are so amazing at helping us with brain health and cardiovascular relaxation and all of that. So self-heal is not just amazing for its ability to moderate inflammation secondary to all of this antioxidant quality that it has, but it also seems to have an immune supportive effect. It's a gentle lymphatic herb, helps move fluid through the body. I was diagnosed in 2019 with a melanoma. So I was working outside for so many years and driving around a tractor with my right arm right up in the sun in a t-shirt or a tank top. Don't do that, farmers. Wear long sleeves. And I ended up with this little freckle that turned black. And then I went as a nurse, I knew what I was looking at. So I went and got it taken off, but I had, it was kind of a pain in the butt. I had a big chunk of my arm taken off as a result. And I drank self-heal tea as my support. Like at that time, it just felt like I needed self-heal. And I didn't really know why necessarily at the time. But then as I was reading more and more about self-heal, it's used in oncological research for immune building and cancer prevention, and it's anti-carcinogenic and all these things. And I love the taste of it. Like it just tastes so good. It tastes like tea kind of. And the problem with self-heal is it's very small and you really can't produce enough of it. Like I need a pound plus per year minimum for just myself, and our whole farm only produces a few pounds per year. So it is something that's precious to me. So I guess that's why it's my favorite. That was a really long answer, but
no, it's excellent. Thank you. I knew you'd have a really good answer to that. This has been such a pleasure. I've learned so much and I'm interested in learning more. So I'm going to first, I want to see when you post that date for your fall event. I might come out. And then your classes sound really interesting and just so educational. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak to me. And I hope a lot of people get a lot out of this. So I think it's so important.
Thank you. It's an honor. And I am so grateful, Jennifer, that you found me.
Yeah, me too. I hope our AgriTourist podcast prompts you to think more about where your food comes from, whether it be your vegetables, fruits, meats, and even those sweet treats. Don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with someone you think may truly benefit from or be inspired by it. Visit us at agra-tourist.com. Until next time. As we are learning from many of our farmers and entrepreneurs, strong connections help propel our visions. Through my interview with Lisa Chase from the University of Vermont Extension and Vermont Tourism Research Center, I was connected to an exciting and new organization called the Global Agritourism Network, or GAN for short. The Global Network is made up of agritourism stakeholders from around the world. They include farmers and ranchers, researchers, educators, community planners, policymakers, agricultural service providers, and tour operators, among others. It is currently free to join, so if you have any interest in agritourism, check them out at agritourism.urac.edu/GAN, or just Google Global Agritourism Network. The link will be in our show notes as well. You never know, this global network may help you take your agritourism vision to the next level.